All right, I am delighted to be here today with Alok and Kruti Kanojia, who are the co-founders of Healthy Gamer.
We're so
And it's Healthy Gamer is a digital platform supporting mental health for gamers. Dr. Kanojia, or Dr. K, as gamers call him, is the world expert on gamer psychiatry. Kruti is the CEO and creates solutions for parents of gamers to build healthy relationships and healthy gaming habits. So thank you both for being here with me today.
Thanks for having us, Rebecca. It's
thanks
our
so
pleasure.
Yeah. So I know that that we found each other and we really are on the same page with the importance of the relationship. And I think it's so important when we're talking about technology, which can be such a divisive topic in families. There are so many families that I can't tell you how many times, how many sessions have been devoted to this topic, how many questions I've had from parents about this. So I'm really excited to be having this conversation that I think is so important, not focusing on how can we get them to stop, how can we shame them out of it, how can we, give them enough consequences or make them, do what we want them to do and get away from the technology, but really recognizing the importance of that and their relationship and how we can shift our focus to that and support our families.
I think that's a great goal. I mean, we sort of share that goal 100% because what we find is that a lot of conflict around gaming actually damages the relationship between parent and child. And if you really want to have an impact on your child's gaming, you have to start by repairing that relationship.
That's right. That's right. So I thought this was a perfect thing for All Relationships Can Heal. Let's talk about that. So I want to talk a little bit about defining the challenge that families have around technology, because gaming is one aspect, but of course it's all the aspects of technology that get in the way. And I want to just first say that we're not saying that gaming and technology is bad. That's not where we're coming from. It's a huge part of life. We're not going to go and become Amish and eschew all technology, or go live on an island somewhere that there's no cell service. Technology is a part of our lives, so we do need to learn how to integrate that into our lives. So let's talk a little bit about what is the challenge that families are having.
Sure. So I think, once again, we agree with you. And I think part of the reason we started Healthy Gamer is because as video game addiction becomes more of a real thing, so 9.4% of people under the age of 18 are addicted to video games. And as that becomes more of a problem, we're sort of getting a lot of like demonization of technology.
Right.
It creates a lot of conflict between parents and kids. And so it sort of gets viewed as evil. But we believe in sort of creating healthy gamers and healthy families. And our goal is to help parents kind of facilitate that. And it's challenging because games and technology are evolving so rapidly that the standard is changing very quickly. So a big challenge that we see with parents is that, sure, you can restrict the amount of hours that a child plays a game, but then what do you do about like when they watch YouTube or when they're reading about the video game? So it's kind of like a moving target. We're not even really sure what's okay, what isn't okay. We get a lot of questions for parents about sort of hourly cutoffs. So they don't even know, what is the right way to approach it? Do we take it away completely? Do we let them do it on the weekends? Is there a certain amount that's too much? So one of the biggest challenges is actually defining the challenge.
Right.
Right.
So true.
Because it's so standard. It's so ubiquitous. Another challenge that we see is that if you're instituting, let's say, a particular regimen or restriction on your child, that can be an uphill battle if other parents are not doing the same thing.
Right. Oh gosh. Yes. I hear this all the time.
So one of the biggest things that we're recognizing is that, you can't just operate in a vacuum. As crazy as this sounds, it's not just about the relationship between you and your child, but also about what your child's friends' parents are doing.
Yes.
And we're seeing more and more of an importance for like parents to actually talk together about instituting sort of common limits so that your child, because it can actually be one of the worst things that can happen is that If you take a video game away, and that's a big part of social communities now,
Yeah.
that's a big part of how your child interacts with his or her peers. And so you have to be really careful about that, because you don't want to isolate him or her from his friend group.
Right.
And so we really find that that's a big challenge in terms of like what other families are doing. And then I think the biggest challenge is that a lot of these things do have kind of addictive qualities. And a lot of times, actually, what they can do is turn your child into someone that they're usually not. And how
Right.
do you kind of deal with someone who's a little bit more irrational, is a little bit more irritable? It's hard to deal with your child when they stay up later than they should be, because then they're cranky the next day. And if you're trying to connect with them, that can be really hard because their brain just isn't functioning properly. They're exhausted.
Right.
So I think those are all challenges.
Yes. It's challenging to parent right now. That's as a parent myself, I've got 15 and 20-year-old, and so yeah, these are all conversations that we've been having for a long time.
I think it's also very easy to get so caught up in the regulation and the monitoring and the rules of it, and kind of stop appreciating all the good things that technology is doing for us, right? One of the things that we talk about is how games in particular can really stimulate intellectual challenge, right? If your kid is bored at school, they can instantly level up in games, right? So there's more kind of like quick response in there, or if they're very creative and don't have a lot of outlets for that, games can be a great place for that. Alok was talking about the social aspect. If your kid is one of those kids that, doesn't really have a lot of friends for whatever reason in the classroom, um, online can be a great place to form those relationships. So I think a lot of what we can do in those instances is just to recognize that there's a lot of good that can come out of this as well.
Absolutely, because we're not trying to vilify games or gaming or technology. There are some amazing things that kids learn. My son, my 15-year-old, has been playing Minecraft for a really long time, and he builds these incredible worlds. For a couple of years, he was working on a cruise ship. It is the most detailed thing. It makes me dizzy to like try to go down into the portals and everything, but I mean, just what he created is incredible.
Yeah.
And so, and he loved Legos, and still, was building things, and then building things in his virtual world, and then building things in person. And so there's so much good. And I think I would love to just segue a little bit into your story, Dr. K, because I know that gaming was a big part of your life, and well, it still is, it's just in different forms.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your own story.
Yeah. So I think, my story actually starts with, I started school early, and I never really understood this until far later, but I was younger than all of my peers,
Mm-hmm.
which really meant that I didn't do well at sports. So I was like, I started, I think, first grade at the age of like 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
I was competing against like 6-year-olds. And so I sort of, from a young age, never felt like I was good at sports. And I realized that was just because I was a year younger.
Right.
And then so got bullied a fair amount, and kind of got picked last for the team, and those kinds of things, because a lot of, when I went to school, it was a lot of your social standing had to do with your physical prowess.
Yeah.
And so I started playing games because that was kind of a place where I felt equal, because I could play just as well as anyone else. And really kind of turned to games as kind of a coping mechanism in a lot of ways from bullying and things like that. And then really started to have problems around high school. My grades started to suffer. And then when I went to college, really just didn't do well. I was on academic probation, was basically failing out of college, had less than a 2.0 GPA because I was playing video games like all day. And then thankfully, and then that had created a lot of conflict between me and my parents as well, because they were kind of, they didn't quite understand what was going on. They just knew that I wasn't doing well in school.
Yeah.
And even back then, I didn't have the words to explain to them that, like, I'm playing video games. Like, I knew that they would punish me basically if I was open with them about my problem.
Mm-hmm.
which is another big challenge that people face, you know, when they have a behavior that they know is ruining their life, but when you kind of get punished for it.
Mm-hmm.
There really wasn't a great time. The summer after my sophomore year, my dad kind of sat down, and, you know, I'd been yelled at and things like that, but he kind of said, like, this isn't working. And he actually took a really different approach and was sort of like, you know, this is not working. Like, do you agree? It wasn't me being yelled at. It was like us problem solving together.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, it's not working. And he's like, so, you know, I think you should go to India. And so he sort of recommended that I go to an ashram, which is like a monastery where people study yoga and meditation. And I said, okay, fine. And 2 weeks later, I was on a plane and then ended up staying in India for 3 months studying yoga and meditation, and absolutely loved it.
Wow.
I discovered a system that taught me like how I work. So, you know, I would learn mathematics and Spanish and history and things like that, but no one teaches you, like, where do your desires come from? Why is it that sometimes you can conquer them and sometimes you can't? And that was a wonderful part of kind of his own journey that he had kind of done over the last decade that he kind of shared with me. I actually decided to become a monk, and then met Kruti.
Decided that wasn't going to work for you.
That wasn't going to work out. But spent years actually studying yoga and meditation, and then decided to end up going to medical school. And then did neuroscience research for a little while, and then became a psychiatrist. And as a psychiatrist, I started asking people, and during that entire time, by the way, I was still playing video games, just in a much more balanced way.
Yeah.
And also my parents and I, you know, we were on much better terms as I started to put my life together, and things like that. So when I was training to become a psychiatrist, I started asking people, like, what do you guys think about video game addiction? And I was lucky enough to train at some wonderful institutions, and you know, these are people that are at Harvard Medical School, and so they're like really experts in their field, and no one really knew anything. And you know, one person that I was working, one of my supervisors, who's just a brilliant psychoanalyst, was kind of saying, yeah, I think it has something to do with why people get tattoos. And that really confused me. And that's when it struck me
Yeah.
that leaders in the field of like psychology and psychiatry are in their 50s. They've never played a video game.
Right. They have no idea.
They really don't. They have kids who play video games and stuff like that, but they've never really played video games.
Right.
And so I saw a big need that like gamers were, and I reached out to friends of mine and just started talking to them. So I would just talk to gamers from the internet. So like literally all over the world, and just ask them, why do you play video games? Do you try to stop? And why can't you stop?
Mm-hmm.
And that was about 5 years ago. And so now, as we've kind of evolved, I started working with gamers. And then as I started to kind of get some traction on social media or different kind of news outlets or articles or things like that, then parents started reaching out. And so we actually pivoted. The first sort of really packaged product we made was actually for parents, because what I saw is that the biggest lack of guidance is actually for parents. Parents are going to pediatricians and they're asking them what's okay and what's not okay. Pediatricians don't know.
They don't know.
Both of our moms are pediatricians, by the way.
And they don't
know. Right.
And so technology has really taken over so much of our life. It's become so ubiquitous. I think, you know, the first smartphone came out like 15 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And in such a small amount of time, it dominates everything, and parents just don't know what to do. Games are becoming more addictive. You know, YouTube is becoming more engaging. It's easier to spend more and more time. There are books and studies and dissertations being written about how to keep someone glued to a screen.
Right.
And so parents are facing like harder and harder challenges as games become more engrossing.
Right. Right. By design.
By design.
Yes.
And then to like level the playing field, right? The resources that they have, the teachers, pediatricians, psychiatrists even, I think 60% of psychiatrists in this country are over the age of 55. So if you have this problem and you go through the insurance and you find somebody, you get on the wait list and you finally get into that appointment, you have a much higher chance than not of that person thinking it has something to do with tattoos. right?
No,
So,
it has nothing to do with tattoos.
right. And so when I kind of saw, there was an event around this time last year, and there were a bunch of talking heads on the news saying, "Well, it's because of video games." And Alok turned to me, he said, "These people don't have a clue." I was like, "Wait a minute, do you?" And he was like, "I think I do. I've lived it. I've talked to about 100 gamers at this point. I've trained with the best of the best. I think I know what I'm talking about." And so we said, "Okay, let's talk about it." And so he did this open forum on Reddit, and about 100 people reached out and said, "Can you help me?" Gamers,
Mm,
right? That recognized that it had gone too far. Um, and we said, "I don't think we can. We're not licensed in your state. There's no way to reimburse us. There's too much liability. Like, I don't know how this could work." And that's a lot of why we created the solutions that we did, is to just kind of nip it in the bud in the first place. What is it that these people could have had growing up that would have still let them play games, still let them have all of the beautiful things that have come out of. I met some of Alok's friends at our wedding for the first time. So it's just the reason why we do kind of what we do is because there's just this huge gap right now in knowledge.
yeah. Yeah. And parents are in that gap. They are in the gap going, what do I do? Someone help me.
Yeah. I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
Is that parents, you just think about a parent and you go home and like you have a 15-year-old, right?
Hmm.
And so like, how do you know what is too much, when isn't too much? Does it impact their sleep? Like, how do you know as a parent, like, how do you know if it's a problem?
Right.
How do you know if your kid is playing too much because everyone else is playing a lot?
Right.
You know,
Right.
so I think a big challenge that we see with video gaming is that over time, what tends to happen is it becomes child plus video game against parent.
Right.
So it evolves into this oppositional relationship where your child sees you as the enemy because you're trying to take away the video game,
Right.
and they don't, they don't feel understood. So I think one of the biggest challenges is the relationship between parent and child.
Yeah.
And as you try
Yeah.
to restrict something that you think is, or is impacting your child, like how do you go about doing that without becoming the enemy?
Right. Right. And that's what we're going to be talking about as we continue our conversation. So thank you so much for this start, and stay tuned for more tomorrow.